Imagine you're standing in the middle of an ancient battlefield. There's no place to hide. All around you, chaos. The ground shakes from marching feet. The sky darkens with arrows, and the air is filled with the sounds of metal crashing and warriors screaming. Then, in the distance, you spot something strange, a weapon unlike anything you've ever seen. Not just deadly, horrifying. This wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about scaring your enemies so much they couldn't think straight. Some weapons were so brutal, so cruel, that they left a mark not just on bodies, but on history itself. Today, we're talking about those weapons, the most horrible, terrifying tools ever used in ancient wars. Some will shock you. Some will make you question how far people were willing to go to win. And all of them are real. Stay with us till the end. You don't want to miss a single one. Long before guns and tanks, wars were still devastating. Ancient soldiers didn't have modern tech, but they had sharp minds and sharper blades. They used what they had: metal, fire, wood, animals, even fear itself. But here's the thing. Ancient war wasn't just about strength. It was about fear, surprise, and pain. Many of the weapons created in those times weren't just designed to kill. They were built to terrify. Some of them tore bodies apart in the most gruesome ways. Others caused pain for hours or even days before death finally came. And some worked without even touching the enemy. By scaring them so badly, they ran before the battle even began. In this video, we'll look at 20 of the most horrible weapons ever used in ancient wars. These aren't just your basic swords or bows. These are the things that kept soldiers awake at night. Let's get started. 1. The Copesh, Egypt's terrifying curved blade. The Copesh wasn't just a sword. It was a message that said, "You're not safe, even behind your shield." This weapon looked like a mix between a sword and a sickle. It started straight, but the end curved forward in a hook. And that hook wasn't for decoration. It was for pulling. Ancient Egyptian warriors used the Copesh to hook their enemies' weapons, yanking them away to leave them wide open. Even worse, it could be used to pull away shields or even arms. The curve made it perfect for slicing deep into flesh, even around armor. Pharaohs loved it. Many kings were buried with a Copesh in their tomb, believing it would protect them in the afterlife. In battle, it gave Egyptian soldiers an edge, not just in combat, but in fear. When enemies saw the strange, hooked blade coming at them, they panicked. It was brutal, and that's exactly how the Egyptians liked it. 2. Greek fire, the original flamethrower. Fire is scary, but fire that doesn't go out, that's nightmare fuel. Greek fire was a weapon used by the Byzantine Empire. Starting around the 7th century, it was a thick, sticky liquid that burned like crazy and kept burning even on water. That's what made it so deadly in naval battles. Ships would catch fire, and their crews couldn't put it out. They'd jump overboard, only to find the fire still spreading on the surface of the sea. No one knows the exact recipe. That was one of the best-kept secrets in history. Some say it included oil, pitch, sulfur, and other nasty ingredients. But the truth is, we're still guessing. What we do know is this: it worked. Greek fire wasn't just a weapon. It was a psychological bomb. When enemy sailors saw it coming, many of them didn't even fight. They just ran. It turned battles into panics. And it gave the Byzantines a huge advantage for hundreds of years. Imagine trying to fight while your ship is on fire and the ocean itself is burning around you. That's Greek fire. And that's horror. 3. The ballista, the giant crossbow of ancient death. The ballista looked like something out of a nightmare. It was a massive crossbow, sometimes as big as a car, used by the Greeks and Romans to launch huge arrows, or even stones, over long distances. Imagine a giant spear, thick as your arm, flying at you faster than you can react. That's what the ballista could do. It was originally based on the tension of twisted ropes or sinew, and with enough power, it could pierce armor, shields, and walls. These bolts could even knock groups of soldiers off their feet or tear through enemy lines. In siege warfare, it was a weapon of fear. You could hear it fire before you saw the projectile, and by then it was usually too late. Ballistas were accurate, deadly, and built to crush the morale of anyone hiding behind a wall or fort. Some historians say it was one of the most effective psychological weapons of the time. Just the sound of one being loaded was enough to send shivers through an enemy army. For the Saresa, Alexander's wall of spears. Now let's talk about the Saresa, a weapon that wasn't horrible because of its shape, but because of how it was used. This spear was about 4 to 6 meters long. That's longer than most cars. And when thousands of Macedonian soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, each holding one of these spears, it looked like a forest of death. Alexander the Great's armies used the Saresa in what's called a phalanx formation. Soldiers stood in rows, their spears all pointing forward. Enemies couldn't get close without getting stabbed again and again. It was like running into a wall made of knives. Horses refused to charge it. Infantry couldn't break it. The Saresa wasn't just a weapon. It was part of a terrifying machine made up of men and steel. And the worst part? If someone fell in front of the formation, they'd be trampled by their own side. There was no room for weakness. It was all forward, always forward, until the enemy was dead or gone. 5. The repeating crossbow, ancient rapid fire. Fast doesn't always mean better in ancient war. But when you're fighting against a huge army, speed can save your life. In China, inventors created the repeating crossbow, also called the Zhuge-Nu. It wasn't as powerful as a single-shot crossbow, but could fire bolt after bolt in quick succession. Soldiers would just push and pull a lever, and the crossbow would reload and shoot again almost instantly. The bolts weren't big. They didn't punch through armor, but they didn't need to against unarmored troops or tight groups of enemies. This weapon was like ancient machine gun fire. It was especially deadly in ambushes or from behind walls, where a rain of fast-firing bolts could thin out enemy forces before they got close. And if that wasn't bad enough, some soldiers dipped the bolts in poison. Even a scratch could be fatal. 6. War elephants, living tanks of the battlefield. Picture this: a 6-ton animal, armored in iron, with sharp tusks, carrying warriors on its back. That's a war elephant. Ancient armies in India, Persia, and later Carthage used elephants like tanks. They weren't just muscle, they were chaos machines. These elephants could break enemy lines just by charging. Horses panicked at their smell. Men fled at their sight. And if the elephant trampled you, there wasn't much left to bury. But here's the terrifying twist. Elephants couldn't always be controlled. If they got hurt or confused, they sometimes turned around and trampled their own soldiers. Entire battles were lost when war elephants went wild. So why use them? Because when they worked, they were nearly unstoppable. Some carried archers. Others had sharp blades tied to their tusks. And all of them struck fear into anyone foolish enough to stand in their way. 7. The onager, the donkey kick of doom. The onager got its name from a wild donkey. Why? Because when it fired, it kicked like one. This ancient Roman siege weapon was a type of catapult, but it didn't throw small stones. It hurled massive boulders, often the size of basketballs, or bigger, straight into enemy walls or crowds. What made the onager especially horrible was its sheer force. The rocks it launched could shatter bone, collapse towers, and crush dozens of people in one hit. It was often loaded with fire-soaked stones or even containers filled with burning oil. In battle, it caused both physical and mental damage. Defenders on walls were torn apart. Hiding inside a castle didn't guarantee safety. Rocks smashed right through stone. And once morale broke, surrender usually followed. 8. Poison arrows, death and a scratch. Sometimes the worst weapons don't kill fast. They make you suffer first. Ancient warriors across Asia, Africa, and South America all used poison arrows. They'd take toxins from snakes, frogs, or deadly plants and coat their arrowheads. The result? Even a small cut could lead to days of pain, paralysis, or death. Some poisons caused bleeding that wouldn't stop. Others shut down the nervous system. There are records of soldiers going blind, vomiting blood, or screaming in agony before dying. And the fear? It was everywhere. Soldiers were terrified of even a graze. Commanders had to deal with panicked troops refusing to charge because they knew what a poison wound meant. It wasn't just about killing. It was about sending a message. We don't just want to win. We want you to suffer. 9 side chariots, blades on wheels. Invented by the Persians, side chariots were literally chariots with giant blades attached to the wheels. These spinning death machines charged through enemy lines at high speeds, slicing off legs, arms, and heads as they went. The idea was to break enemy formations. And it worked, if the terrain was right. In open plains, side chariots could cause chaos, turning an organized army into scattered survivors in seconds. But they were risky. If the horses panicked or hit rough ground, the chariots could flip, or worse, spin back into their own troops. Still, the terror they caused made them worth the gamble. No one wants to fight while trying to dodge spinning blades at knee height. 10. The flail, chaos, and the swing. At first glance, the flail looks like a farmer's tool gone horribly wrong. It's a stick with a chain, and at the end of that chain, a heavy ball, sometimes covered in spikes. But this wasn't for threshing grain. This was made for breaking bones. The flail was brutal because it didn't just hit, it whipped. It could go around shields, around helmets, and land a crushing blow from an unexpected angle. Most weapons are blocked by a solid defense. The flail laughs at defense. It's unpredictable, fast, and hits hard. Worse still, many soldiers weren't trained to fight against it. Blocking it was dangerous. If you grabbed the chain, the wielder could yank it and dislocate your arm. If you tried to dodge it, the flail could curve midair and still strike you. It took skill to use well, but in the hands of a trained warrior, it was like holding chaos itself. 11. The Dory, backbone of Greek hoplite warfare. At first glance, the Dory seemed simple, just a spear about 2 meters long. But in the right hands, and with the right training, it became one of the most effective weapons in the ancient world. Greek hoplites, citizen soldiers, carried these spears into battle as part of a larger unit called the phalanx. Each soldier held a shield in one hand and the dory in the other. Together, they formed a solid wall of shields and spears that moved as one. The dory was meant for thrusting, not throwing. Its design allowed hoplites to jab at their enemies from behind their massive round shields. Some versions had a spike on the bottom, so if the top blade broke, the spear could still be used, or it could be driven into the fallen to finish them off. The horror of the dory didn't lie in its complexity. It lay in its coordination. Facing a wall of these spears was like charging into death itself, row after row. 12. The gladius, Rome's short blade of terror. The gladius wasn't flashy. It wasn't big, but in the hands of a Roman soldier, it was terrifyingly efficient. This short sword, about 18 to 24 inches long, was designed for one thing: close quarters killing. While other cultures used long, sweeping swords for slashing, the gladius was all about stabbing. Roman soldiers trained to aim for the belly or under the ribs. A single deep stab could end a life in seconds. The gladius worked best in formation. Roman legions stood shoulder to shoulder behind their shields. They'd thrust their gladius through the gaps, killing enemies before they even knew what hit them. The style wasn't showy, but it worked. And psychologically, it wore enemies down. Roman discipline and cold precision made their enemies feel like they were fighting machines, not men. 13. The sling, simplicity with surprising power. Don't laugh at the sling. It might look like a child's toy, but in the right hands, it was a sniper rifle. Made from leather or woven fibers, a sling used centrifugal force to launch stones at incredible speed. Skilled slingers could kill a man from over 100 meters away. And the sound? A whip crack that struck fear before the stone even landed. In some cases, the stones were shaped or even engraved with insults, tiny psychological bombs. Others were made of lead for extra damage. A stone hitting your skull at high speed could crack it open like an egg. Roman generals feared slingers more than archers. Why? Because you could hear arrows. You couldn't hear sling stones until they smashed your face. 14. Caltrops, the trap you couldn't escape. One of the simplest and most hated weapons of all time, the caltrop. It's just a small metal object with 4 spikes. No matter how it lands, one spike always points up. Soldiers would scatter them across roads, trails, and battlefields. And then they'd wait. Horses stepped on them and went down, often throwing riders into chaos. Armies on the march had to stop and clear paths. Even barefoot or lightly armored foot soldiers were in danger. Caltrops didn't kill, but they slowed armies, wounded feet, and ruined plans. In ancient times, even a limp could mean death. And if you couldn't run, you couldn't survive. 15. The man-catcher. Not every weapon was for killing. Sometimes, ancient soldiers didn't want to kill their enemies. They wanted to catch them, especially nobles or enemy leaders, who could be ransomed for gold or used for political leverage. That's where the man-catcher came in. This polearm had a rounded or spring-loaded metal loop at the end. It could trap a person by the neck or limbs, pinning them without cutting them. Imagine being grabbed by a giant metal claw during a siege, dragged off your horse, and taken alive. It was humiliating, terrifying, and in some cases, worse than death. Man-catchers weren't always used in combat. They were also used by guards to subdue unruly prisoners. But on the battlefield, they turned people into property. 16. The Macuahuitl, the Aztec chainsaw. Now we enter the New World. The Aztecs didn't have metal weapons, but that didn't stop them from creating one of the most terrifying swords in history. The Macuahuitl. This was a wooden club lined with obsidian blades, volcanic glass sharp enough to cut through bone. Some versions were shaped like a paddle, others more like a sword. And when swung, it didn't just cut, it tore. Spanish conquistadors wrote about this weapon with fear. One account claimed it was so sharp, it could decapitate a horse in a single strike. Whether that's true or not, one thing is clear. Getting hit by a Macuahuitl meant deep, gruesome wounds that bled out fast. And worse, the Aztecs didn't always aim to kill. They wanted to wound and capture, so they could sacrifice their prisoners later. 17. The Chakram, the flying razor. The Chakram was a circular throwing weapon from India, thin, flat, and razor-sharp around the edges. It was designed to slice through air and flesh. It could be thrown overhead like a frisbee or underhand with a flick of the wrist. Some warriors even carried multiple chakrams stacked on their arms, ready to hurl them one after another, used both on foot and horseback. Chakrams were hard to see in flight. 1 second you were charging forward. The next, your ear, nose, or fingers were gone. It didn't always kill, but it maimed fast and frightened many. Some warriors decorated them to reflect sunlight, creating a blinding flash before the cut. That combination of surprise and damage made the chakram both effective and horrifying. Now that we've explored these horrible ancient weapons, one thing is clear. War was never just about strength. It was about fear, pain, and control. These weren't just tools to kill, but to break the enemy's spirit. From the slow burn of Greek fire to the crushing power of war elephants and the silent slice of the chakram, ancient warriors faced brutal weapons designed to terrify. What's most shocking? All of this happened without modern tech. Just wood, stone, iron, and ruthless human creativity. History proves that fear has always been a weapon, and those who mastered it usually won. If you enjoyed this look into the darker side of history, hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable stories from the past. Got a favorite weapon or one we missed? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. Stay sharp. See you next time.